Imagine 400 individuals caught in an unstoppable dance frenzy for over 30 days, persisting even in the face of tragedy, or over 1,000 children laughing incessantly for an entire year. How and why would the inhabitants of a city attack themselves and blame an imaginary character? Cases like this, though exceptionally uncommon, are fascinating to explore. We all know that a contagion is when a sickness or a virus spreads from one individual to another. However, it is not only viruses that are contagious. Ideas and psychological states can be contagious too. Let me tell you all about this strange phenomenon: mass hysteria. Mass hysteria is when a group of people share unusual, uncharacteristic behaviors, such as unwarranted enthusiasm, anxiety, paranoia, or any other state of mind. Most of the time, this happens to groups of people experiencing uncomfortable emotions, such as anxiety, depression, or stress. Those emotions are then transformed into unusual physical symptoms that are then spread from one individual to another. Let's see together some of the strangest mass hysterias in recent history. The dancing plague. Perhaps one of the most famous recorded cases of mass hysteria, the dancing plague, started in 1518 in the French city of Strasbourg, when a woman started dancing in the middle of the street for absolutely no reason. At first, she was the only one dancing, but she refused to stop, and people loved her energy and began joining her. The group only got bigger, and they were not quitting anytime soon. In fact, 10 days later, there were over 50 people dancing. 1 month later, there were 400 of them. They just could not stop no matter how hard they tried. Some of them even ended up dying due to seizures and heart attacks. I know you're probably thinking, well, this can't be true. This story has to be fake. France's dancing plague is documented by various trustworthy sources, such as doctor records of the era, physician notes, cathedral sermons, and even notes issued by the Strasbourg City Council. Back then, authorities had no idea what was the cause behind this weird event. Their first instinct was to let them dance. They gotta tire and stop eventually, right? Except, they never stopped. So the authorities decided to tire the population as much as possible before looking for other solutions. They hired musicians, dancing bands, and parades to join in and party like there's no tomorrow. Sadly, this did not help at all. People were still dancing even after some of them were dying of exhaustion. The final death toll is not known, and controversy exists over whether people ultimately danced to their deaths or not. In September of 1518, approximately 2 months after the dancing started, and without any explanation, people finally stopped. The next time you're wandering the streets of your city after a night out and see a group of people dancing, think twice before joining them. Salem Witch Trials. Salem Witch Trials is a sad, heartbreaking story that led to the death of more than 20 innocent people. In 1962, in the village of Salem, 2 little schoolgirls, Betty and Abigail Williams, started behaving strangely. They were screaming, throwing things around, and contorted themselves into strange positions. Before you know it, this behavior quickly spread to over 200 people. Local doctors, having no explanation to what was going on, blamed the supernatural. Some of the girls were pressured to blame their behavior on witchcraft. The timing of this mass hysteria could not have been worse. At the time, officials were hunting down people for witchcraft and executing them. More than 200 people were accused. Tragically, 30 of them were found guilty, and 19 of them were executed by hanging. The Tagnyika laughter epidemic. Surely you've been a victim of contagious laughter before, haven't you? You know, when you see someone laughing hysterically and suddenly you find yourself laughing uncontrollably as well? This happens all the time and is actually hilarious. On the 31st of January 1962, in a school in Tagnyika, which is Tanzania now, 3 students started laughing like you've never seen before. At first, nobody cared. Kids laugh all the time, especially at school. However, they were still laughing hours later. And by they, I mean 90 of them. 90 students aged between 12 and 18 were now laughing hysterically. On the 18th of March, a month and a half later, the school had to close its doors because children were still laughing uncontrollably. The kids now had more free time on their hands, more time to visit neighbors and friends and spread the mass hysteria to even more people. Soon after, the hysteria affected over 1,000 kids and 14 other schools were forced to shut their doors. Sadly, excessive laughter resulted in breathing problems for some of the kids, and a lot of them ended up fainting at random times. This lasted for 18 months, a year and a half of non-stop laughter. Experts say that students in that area were under a lot of stress and anxiety, which inevitably transformed into mass hysteria. The Halifax slasher. Out of all the mass hysteria stories, this one might be the strangest. In 1927, in the English city of Halifax, James Leonard used to attack people with a knife and slash their clothes. He never killed anyone and was arrested for 6 months. 11 years later, in 1938, the knife attacks returned. On the 16th of November, 2 women claimed to have been attacked by a guy with a knife, but they managed to run away. 5 days later, on the 21st of November, a 3rd woman reported being harassed and attacked while on the streets of the city. The reports kept coming, and the residents of Halifax were now anxious and living in constant fear. They started forming groups and taking turns protecting the streets. People were getting angry and overwhelmed with stress. They even started accusing one another of being the Halifax slasher and threatening each other. Everyone was becoming violent. Percy Waddington was one of the alleged victims of the Halifax slasher. When Percy saw his neighbors, friends, and even family members become extremely uneasy, he came forward admitting that he made the whole thing up and that he was never attacked. Percy was the first of many. One after the other, the victims of the so-called Halifax slasher came forward admitting that it was just a story they created to get attention. Apparently, no one was ever attacked. All of their injuries were self-inflicted, and the Halifax slasher never existed. A whole region lived in complete fear because of a mass hysteria that caused its residents to harm themselves and blame it on an imaginary villain. You might want to head the other way the next time you see a group of people behaving strangely. For an even stranger story, click on this video.